The Lord our God will take care of the things that he's leading us into and doing, just like he did with Israel. Now notice, the Lord explains how he's doing this. And this is where we need to catch how the Lord works. See, we expect everything boom. But what does he say? Verse 22, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you, little by little. You're going to go in and you're going to take the land. And you're going to establish yourself there. However, understand God works in time and in space. And so though you're going to establish yourself, you're not going to completely uproot all the peoples right away. Why? Because God knows things more than you do. You will not be allowed to eliminate them all at once, or the wild animals will multiply around you. But the Lord your God will deliver them over to you, throwing them into great confusion until he will give their kings into your hands, and you will wipe out their names from under heaven. No one will be able to stand up against you. You will destroy them. The images of their gods you are to burn in fire. Do not covet the silver or the gold on them. Do not take it for yourselves, or you will be ensnared by it, for it is detestable to the Lord your God. Do not bring a detestable thing into your house, or you, like it, will be set apart for destruction. Utterly abhor it, for it is set apart for destruction. God says, little by little, I'm going to give these people over into your hands, because if I take them all out of the land at one time, you're not going to be able to keep the land. You're not enough people to possess all the land, and the wild animals will take over. God says, in my wisdom, I'm going to establish you in that land, and I'm going to put you in that place. And when I do, understand, though you're established, your job is not finished. You are going to continue to take the land. And as you do, destroy everything that is not of me. Take it all for the Lord. And the Lord said, when there are things that are considered sacred by the people of the land, and you take those, grind them up, crush them, destroy them, burn them, and utterly get rid of them. And do not covet the gold and the silver. Because the very material that those things are made out of is considered abhorrent to God. The gold was used to make an idol that was set up over God. God said that gold is detestable for me. Do not even bring it into your house. The things of the world, the gold, the silver, the precious stones, and all that stuff the world considers valuable. God says, don't bring it in your house, because if you do, you're setting your house up for the destruction of the wrath of God. Because that stuff, though in and of itself, it has no value, it is abhorrent to me because it was used for something that is contrary to my will.
This is for the idols, though, right? Because they were burning silver and gold, making idols out of it.
But anything that is used to build something or bring something contrary to God is the same as their idols.
But in our Philippians, they have given his gift as a very precious gold image of Krishna, Ganesh. And when they gave us, we did not take it and we gave it back.
Yeah.
We don't want it.
And there's people that are like, well, this is gold. Maybe I can just sell it and melt it down and make something new. God says no. Because it was used to make an idol, it's abhorrent. Don't even bring it in your house. You will bring a curse upon your house by doing that. And many times Christians get little trinkets from overseas that are made out of silver or made out of gold. It's given to them by people who mean well. We had a little silver Buddha that was given to us by a very dear friend of ours in India. And we didn't want to say no because you don't want to offend them. We brought it home. Folks, that was a curse in our house. I can't tell you the issues that came until we took that thing, took a hammer to it, utterly beat it and smashed it and destroyed it and broke all the power of it that came in with our house. We've learned a lot of things the hard way. God says, do not even bring it into your house. It is a curse. But know that God is the one who's going to take care of these things, and He is the one that we're serving. Let's keep that in mind. Chapter 8. Be careful to follow every command that I am giving you today, so that you may live and increase and may enter and possess the land that the Lord promised on oath to your father. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the desert these 40 years to humble you and to test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. Well, that's a little bit of a different way of looking at things. We were walking in the desert for 40 years. It was hot. It was dry. There was sand everywhere. All we had to eat was manna. And after 40 years, manna is as boring as it sounds. How much can you do with breadcrumbs? And yet, Moses said, God took you all the way through the desert, number one, to humble you, to test you, to test your heart, in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger and then feeding you with manna, which neither you or your fathers had known, to teach you that man does not live by bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. He humbled you. In other words, he made you unable to take care of yourself. He made you dependent on. There is nothing more grating to the pride of a human being than having to be dependent on somebody else. You know how many men have put their families through hell because they were not going to let anybody else do it for them? They're going to do it there. They're going to make sure they take care of this. That's pride, and that's all it is. And women, you do the same thing. We can handle this. We're women. We can do whatever men can do. God will humble you and make you unable to do it so that you're reliant on him. He'll see if you're willing to trust in him, because he wants you to understand. He'll humble you and make you hungry. God would never do that. He wants to make us wealthy. He's not going to make us starve. Yes, he did the Israelites. Why wouldn't he do it you? Why does he do it though? Moses said, take a different perspective. He made you hungry so that he can provide manna for you. Oh, great. God makes me hungry so he can give me breadcrumbs. Wow. No, he made you hungry so that he can feed you with the bread of heaven. So that you might understand that you don't live by natural means alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. Because where did the manna come from? The manna came from the word that God spoke. From this day forward, I will give you bread that will come from heaven, and it will be on the ground every morning. And God spoke it, and it happened. When he says that man will not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God, he means that literally. The bread was created by the word that came out of the mouth of God. God spoke it into existence. And he'll do the same thing for everything that you and I need. Your clothes, get this. Oh, ye great shopping generation. Your clothes did not wear out and your feet did not swell during these 40 years. You know, we all think about, hey, they're running around for 40 years in the desert. They must have all been in rags and their feet must have been swollen and sore. Moses said, take a look at your feet, folks. You've been walking the hot sands of the desert for 40 years, and I can tell you, not one of you have had swollen feet the whole time. God bless my wife. That is just heaven on earth to her. That's a promise she's made. But your clothes did not wear out. How often do we get in the midst of a place that the Lord has us and all we're worried about is what am I going to wear and what am I going to eat? For 40 years. Can you imagine? My wife could imagine me wearing the same clothes for 40 years. But can you imagine wearing the same outfits and probably only one or two for 40 years? Most of you women just about had a heart attack. And yet for 40 years, those clothing, even in the midst of the hot sun, and I don't know how many of you have ever lived in a really hot climate, sun bleaches clothes. And sun makes the clothing, the cloth very, very brittle. I lived in India. You'd be surprised how quickly shirts wear out in the summertime at 120-degree heat every day. That cloth becomes very, very brittle by the burning of the heat on it. And yet for 40 years, their clothing did not wear out. They weren't a bunch of ragtags walking in with just strips covering the important parts of their body as they walked in the promised land. They were fully, completely clothed with clothes that looked like they just bought them yesterday. Why? Because my God can make anything last. Do you know who your God is?
No sides of this true. No sides.
Know in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. Does this sound familiar?
Hey, that's Hebrews.
Thank you. Somebody's been listening. Observe the commands of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and revering him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and pools of water, with springs flowing in the valleys and hills, a land with wheat and barley and vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce and you will lack nothing, a land where rocks are iron and you can dig copper out of the hills. When you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied, then your hearts will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. He led you through the vast, dreadful desert, that thirsty and waterless land with its venomous snakes and scorpions. He brought you water out of hard rock. He gave you manna to eat in the desert, something your fathers had never known, to humble and test you, so that in the end it might go well with you. You may say to yourselves, my power and strength and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your forefathers to this day. Be careful of your pride. Folks, I know people who have made that statement. God didn't bless me with anything. I did this by my own hard work. I put the time in, I put in the energy. I did this, I did this, I did this. When you start hearing I did, you remember the I will of Satan, because you're falling in the same trap of arrogance and pride. You can do nothing unless the Lord gives you the strength to do it.
Mhm.
And the reason the Lord takes you through the trials of the desert is to bring you to the place where you understand that it is Him. It is God who does it all for you. Has nothing to do with you. Remember, the Lord said, when you come into your blessing, remember it was God who gave it to you. You see, God told me something today that has just been pounding in my mind. In the time of your trial, be sure to make time for the Lord. Because if you don't make time during the trial for the Lord, you won't take time during the blessing. If you don't make time for God now in the midst of your trials, you will not take the time when you don't need it. So many of us get so discouraged because the trial seems so long that we stop making time for the Lord our God. But folks, if you don't make that a habit and a discipline now, when He blesses you, you won't take the time. And I promise you, you won't, because I've seen it over and over again. Those who maintain their relationship with the Lord are the ones who kept it strong in the midst of the trial. Because blessing will make you more dull to the need of the Lord.
Mm.
Because you will fall to that sense of, well, I did this. It was me. The heart of man is deceitful above all else. Be careful. Discipline yourself now to make time for the Lord, so that you do not fall into that trap and that snare. If you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and worship them, and worship and bow down to them, I testify against you today that you will surely be destroyed. Like the nations the Lord destroyed before you, so you will be destroyed for not obeying the Lord your God. Now again, folks, pay attention to what He's about to say. And again, I want you to gather up your self-righteousness and your pride and get ready to toss it on the altar. Hear, O Israel, you are now about to cross the Jordan and go in and dispossess nations greater and stronger than you, with large cities that have walls up to the sky. The people are strong and tall, Anakites. You know about them and have heard it said, who can stand up against the Anakites? But be assured today that the Lord your God is the one who goes across ahead of you like a devouring fire. He will destroy them. He will subdue them before you. He will drive them out and annihilate them quickly, as the Lord has promised you. After the Lord your God has driven them out before you, do not say to yourself, the Lord has brought me here to take possession of this land because of my righteousness. No, it is on account of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is going to drive them out before you.
Mm.
It is not because of your righteousness or your integrity that you are going in to take possession of their land, but on account of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God is driving out before you, to accomplish what He swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Understand then that it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people. Again, it ain't about you, folks. What did God say to Abraham? I am going to take your people, your future generations, and I'm going to take them to a land that is not their own, and they will be slaves for 400 years until what? Until the sin of the Amorites has come to fruition. God said, I'm giving you this land not because you're so good to deserve it. Because quite frankly, you're stubborn, hard-headed, and you got a stiff neck that will not bow to me. I'm giving you this land because these people spurned my grace. These people refused to bow their knee to me. These people, their sin has come to a great fruition. And just as I've warned you, because of their idolatry, this land is spitting them out, spewing them out. The land, the very thing that God created is so offended by the vileness of the people that live there. The land is throwing the people out. And God said, I am bringing you in to possess the land that I created, the land that I call my own, because you are expected to bring my name to honor in that land so that that land will not spew you out.
Do you think maybe that has a correlation when God delivered judgment? He was saying, until it comes into fullness. And it sounds like when the land started to spit them out is when the Lord started to move into judging them.
Yeah.
And it's like also with Cain and Abel too, he was like, your brother's blood is crying out for to me on the land.
The land keeps record. The land belongs to God. He created it. Creation knows its creator, unlike all of nature does, unlike mankind. Mankind is the only created thing that does not recognize its creator. The land still honors the one who created it, though it recognizes that we are putting rule over it. But the land will rise up against its rulers if its rulers do not align themselves with their creator and their God. Be careful. Your blessing is conditional. We want to receive blessing from the Lord, but we forget that that blessing bears a condition. Honor the Lord your God. Obey his commandments. Do what he's telling you to do. And the land will honor you. The land will keep you. The land will work for you. The times have changed, folks. God hasn't. But we are no longer living in the world we lived in yesterday. We need to understand that there's a change. God said to me this morning, it's time to enter into his kingdom. Now, he said that he's bringing us into it. When he said that this morning, he meant this is it. For a week now, the Lord, or a couple days now, the Lord has been, he brought me to Psalm 93 a few days back, and it just has been one of those passages that is burning within me. It says, the Lord reigns. Think about what that means. Meditate on this. The Lord reigns. He is robed in majesty. The Lord is robed in majesty and armed with strength. The world is firmly established. It cannot be moved. Your throne was established long ago. You are from all eternity. What is the throne of the Lord? The earth. The earth has been long established. The earth is not changing, folks. The earth worships the one who sits on the throne. It is mankind that changes and doesn't worship him. He says, the seas have lifted up, O Lord. The seas have lifted up their voice. The seas have lifted up their pounding waves. Mightier than the thunder of great waters, mightier than the breakers of the sea, the Lord on high is mighty. And we live in Jersey. We all have been to the seashore.
Yeah.
We've all seen the power of those waves. We've heard it crashing in our ears. And yet our God is mightier than that. Our God is mightier than Superstorm Sandy that literally devastated the coast of New Jersey and New York. But even as I read that, I got a sense that the waves of the sea are about to speak to this region once more of the mightiness of our God. Be ready. The Lord is on his throne. Keep your eyes on that. Your statutes stand firm. Gee, what are the statutes of the Lord? His laws, his commands. They stand firm. They don't change. They don't waver. They don't get rocked. Where are you going to stand? On the laws of the Lord. And holiness adorns your house for endless days, O Lord. Let's go back and read something, because the other thing the Lord spoke to me today, been a few phrases that have shook me a little bit. The Lord said it is time to enter into Hebrews chapter 12. And this wasn't a word for me, this was a word for the body. Therefore, we're going to reread this, because I believe this is a word from the Lord for today. Therefore, since we are surrounded with such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out before us. They've already done it. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Joshua, David, all of them have done it. We have a great cloud of witnesses before us. Let's throw off everything that hinders. Hinders what? Hinders us from moving into the fullness of what God created us to be. It's time to become who we are. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down on the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Folks, the trials aren't going to get any less. They're actually about to get more. It's about to heat up. Why? Because God is making us into the thing we've been crying out for. How many people around the earth has been crying out, Jesus, come back, come quickly? Well, he ain't coming back until his bride is ready. And he ain't coming back till his bride is complete. Leonard Ravenhill made a comment. He said, if God loved the 500 million back when he sent his son to die on the cross, why would he love the 8 billion any less? You don't think he's about to do something that's going to bring in the greatest harvest? What is that going to be? A bride pure and spotless that will stand up under any persecution and praise and worship her Lord. You know, Christianity today, according to the BBC, one of the most liberal news stations on planet Earth, Christianity is now the most persecuted religion in all the world, everywhere. And it's going to get worse. Why? Because the bride of Christ will not sit back and tolerate false gods. She will grind down the Asherah poles. And everyone looks at me and says, what the heck is an Asherah pole? We read about that in the New Testament. No children in the room. It's a phallus. It's a male penis that is worshipped in fertility. Oh, they can't do it. We don't do that today. Every Hindu temple has one. It's called a Shiva lingam. And it is perverted beyond measure.
And to be honest, Bob, there's actually are structures out there in the world that are actually based on that too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, a lot.
They're all over. But let's get right down to it. What is that whole worship about? Unbridled, unleashed, unadulterated, unashamed sex. Now, you can't tell me we don't live in a nation that worships the Asherah pole. It's everywhere. You can't even watch a movie today without seeing it. But we won't call it for what it is. It's sin. And it's an abhorrence to God. We haven't ground the Asherah poles. We haven't chopped them down and burned them up. We've created an internet that gives them an international forum. Why do you think God has raised up those that have gone after sex trafficking and human trafficking? Because God despises that. It is nothing more than Baal worship and the worship of the Asherah pole. Fix your eyes on Jesus, who bore everything and scorned its pain and suffering. We're entering into the time where we're going to have to bear the cross that God has put before us for Him. We're going to be asked to lay our lives on the line for our Lord like Jesus did. Not to save the world from sin, but to prove to the world that we will not tolerate that which our God does not. And you will not be able to buy or sell. They already have it set up in China. And the entire Western world has asked China for the technology to do it. There's a point system in China. If they find out you go to church, you lose social points. And if you lose social points, you can't buy anything without them. Cash isn't the way anymore. Your cash is meaningless if you don't have the social points because you violated the social conscience. How do you violate the social conscience? Well, you go to church. You worship Jesus. You proclaim yourself a Christian. Guess what? You can't buy or sell. You're going to starve. And the Western governments, including America, is asking China for the technology that they developed so that they can begin to track who we are and what we're doing. In case you didn't know it, Superstorm Sandy was used as an excuse. FEMA set up camps all over this nation, including right down in Edison, New Jersey, in Raritan Center. They brought in trucks and all kinds of things and set up a little camp there. Not one truck ever left that place during Superstorm Sandy, even with all the great needs that were around this area and in this community, because it wasn't meant to be relief for Superstorm Sandy. They were setting up concentration camps to be used at the right time, and they did it all over the nation. They set up these camps and they just don't ever use them. They set it up under relief aid. Well, one day we may be situated in those camps. Be aware of what's happening around us. The time is coming that we will have to do what verse 4 says, in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And you have forgotten the word of encouragement that addresses you as sons. My sons, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves and he punishes everyone he accepts as a son. Does that sound familiar? Didn't we just read that in Deuteronomy? God disciplines you because he loves you and accepts you as his people. And he disciplines those that he loves. Accept the discipline of the Lord. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are illegitimate children and not true sons. Do you want to know if you're a son of the living God? How much are you undergoing discipline at the hand of the Father? We all get put under that. And it ain't pleasant, but it's got a purpose. It's to purify, it's to change us, it's to form us into his image. And we're entering into that time where God is about to heat up the discipline because we lack discipline. We've become so lackadaisical and so lazy as Christians. God said that time is about over. I'm about to wake up my bride, and she's going to get woken up by the Board of Education applied to the seat of learning. The discipline that's coming is discipline. Look at it that way. It's the loving hand of the Father making us into who we are. Folks, why do we want to stay the way we are? Think about it. How's that going for you? We're still waiting for the Lord's blessings. Why aren't they coming? Because we haven't allowed him to make us worthy and capable of handling them. We still have so much more in front of us. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Now, I mean, I'm not picking on my wife, but this situation with her foot was a perfect example of this. She broke a toe, but in order to help the toe, she kept putting pressure on the wrong part of her foot that caused a stress fracture. Which means what? The stress and weight that she was putting on it caused her bones to fracture in 100 different places. Why? Because she had to, up and down steps and, walking on grass and paths and stuff like that. So that caused her feet to move around in ways they weren't meant to move. What was the doctor's diagnosis for that? Get a boot, a surgical boot, one that makes your step level. One that doesn't cause you to bend your foot. It makes your path level so that you're not putting excessive wrong weight on bones that need to be healed. And secondly, take the weight off of it. Stop doing what's going to hurt it. And my wife struggles with that because y'all know her. She loves to serve. She serves our family. She serves her family. She serves everybody around her. And she is restricted in what she can do. That's discipline. That's tough. To sit back and have other people do it for you when you have a heart for serving. And yet the discipline of the Lord is what's causing the lame to be able to walk again. And if she listens to what the doctor says, there's coming a day where she'll be able to walk once more without the boot, without the crutches. See, you're an object lesson to God's people. Lucky you. But that's what God is doing. And he says, strengthen yourself. Be ready to do what the Lord is laying on your heart to do. Make every effort to live in peace with all men, to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. God says, I am a God who is holy. I'm different than every other God. You need to line up with who I am. We sing about him being the great I am, but I am what? I am holy. We need to line us. Holiness adorns his throne. Everything about God is about being different, separate, set apart, holy. And we don't want to be that. We want to be just like everybody else. Well, you can't be just like everybody else and be one of God's people, because God's people aren't like everybody else. Without holiness, without being set apart, without being different from the world, you can't see God. See to it that no one misses the grace of God. What did we just read about the nations of the land of Canaan? Those 7 powerful great nations. God gave them 400 years to receive his grace. And they missed it. And their sin was confirmed. And God was about to destroy them and give their land to somebody who was his people, who would honor him and who would hold his land for him. Be careful you don't miss the grace of God. And that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Afterwards, you know that when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected. He could bring no change of mind, though he sought the blessing with tears. The 2 things that the writer of Hebrews warns us against: sexual immorality of all kinds, of all makes, of all styles, which is all over the place today, and living a life without God. Godlessness. Not needing God. Living as though you don't need him, don't want him, and he's not a part of your life. Be careful of those 2 things, he says. For you have not come, now this sounds like Moses. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to trumpet blast, and to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. Even if an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I'm trembling with fear. God spoke to his people with his voice. Moses said, or the writer of Hebrews said, you're not coming to this. though this was glorious, though this was powerful, though this was something that nobody else in history, the first of us came to this, Israel. However, we, now that Christ is here, you come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, the city of the living God. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all men, to the spirits of righteous men made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. In other words, there's another mountain that we come to. And on this mountain is the city of our God. Here, God came to us. We now have access to go to God. Here, God came down. Here, we have the ability to go up. Here, the angels delivered the law of the righteous law of God and the fear of all the glory that we saw because it revealed our sin. Here, our mediator, Jesus, has removed all that fear and has brought us into the place where in him, he is our mediator. In him, we go before the gloriousness of all that God has made us to be. His blood, the new covenant. This is the old covenant that said, this is what you must do to live among me. This is the new covenant that says, this is how I am going to live in you. See that you do not refuse him that speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth. Who warned them on earth. God came to earth and warned them. If they did not escape when he warned them, how much less if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken. That is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. The message has never changed. And we are about to enter into the time of shaking, of discipline, and anything that is not of God's kingdom will be shaken. Moses warned the people of Israel as they were about to enter their promise. He gave them a shaking, reminding them of the God they served. God is saying, now we are entering into a time when I'm about to shake everything that is not of me. Mm-hmm. We are entering into the time of Hebrews chapter 12, folks. Mm-hmm. But remember, God is on his throne, and his throne is firmly established. Only the things of God cannot be shaken. Only the things of God cannot be moved. Where will we place ourselves? He wants to lead us into the promise. But the things of the old cannot enter into the things of the new. And there is a shaking that is going to occur to shake that off. And that's going to have a lot of things. Many are going to enter into a time of decision. All this stuff that you've been doing for the Lord for all these years hasn't come to fruition. Are you ready to allow it to be shaken? Or are you going to give up? You're about ready to walk into your promise. Let it be shaken. Because the things that God has established that are of his kingdom will be established. And his kingdom will come. His will be done. Will we be allowing him to do that? I know so many believers, countless numbers, who are discouraged because all the things they thought the Lord had called them to just isn't there. Maybe they heard wrong. Maybe they're doing something wrong. Maybe they're disobeying the Lord. Well, God's a God of grace. And he's about to show you which of them is true. Because everything's about to shake. If you've been disobeying the Lord on something, all of that's going to begin shaking. You're going to feel it. It's the grace of God. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. When you start feeling the ground shaking, when you start hearing the waves roaring and thundering, and you start seeing things around you, I mean, folks, I wouldn't doubt that we feel the literal earth shake under our feet. Because God is trying to get our attention. We cannot go on in this nation as we have, godless. We have been called by God to be his people, to be his kingdom on the earth. And he's about to remind us what that means, just like he did with the people of Israel. Are we ready for it? We need to get before the Lord. Keep your eyes on him. Make time for him right now. I can't emphasize that enough. Make time for him every day. It's the only way you will survive what is about to come. We don't live in the world we once lived in. Overnight it changed that quickly. Because God has made a proclamation from his throne. And he's about to do something that, just like the people of Israel, see, this is the glorious thing. The people of Israel at Mount Horeb saw something that nobody else in history ever saw. They saw the living God speak to them in an audible voice, and they lived. I believe we're about to see something that nobody else in history has ever seen. And it's something very similar to what he did at the mountain. Because we're now at another mountain. And it's time for us to enter in. The Lord, I just want to lift us up before you, Lord. Prepare our hearts. But God, I ask for your name's sake that you do not hold back on your grace and the shaking that comes out of that. Make us into your bride. Perfect the one new man. Bring us together with our brothers and sisters that are part of your chosen people. Bring us together with your Son in unity. And remove from us, Lord, everything that is not of you. Let us enter into the glories of your promises and your blessings, but with a pure heart. With lives that reflect your holiness and your glory, so that the world may see that this is a people who in the midst of shaking just become stronger, better, more glorious, more holy, and they reflect their God like never before. That, Lord, the nations may see us and bow in fear before you. Father, create in us the fullness of the image of Christ. Put to death and shake out of us everything that is not him, that you may have full sway. And Father, I ask that you just speak to us this week. Call us apart. Call us with an irresistible call, that we may come into your presence and be prepared for you to do all that you want and long to do within us. Let your word change our perception of who we are and who this world is. Open our eyes to see the peoples around us as you see them, to see the peoples in the world around us as you saw the Canaanites. And let us cry out for your grace, but be prepared to carry out the commands of our King, to remove from this earth that which fights against him. Father, I ask that you would cause us to see sin as utterly detestable, to see sin for what it is, that we might be revolted even down to vomiting at the very sight of the filth of sin around us. And let us cry out your holiness and live your holiness, that the world may see and know. Let us glorify you as you wanted your people to glorify you in your land. Make us the fulfillment of your heart, Lord. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Hold on.
There and Phoebe's mom, she was born.
Okay. Actually, we have two people I'd like us to pray for. Mahad and Phoebe's mother needs prayer. If we'll bring her up and we can gather around her and pray. I'd also like us to pray for Marcos, because he's getting ready to go on a mission trip to Brazil. When is it? June 25th. So there's a lot of preparation for that. He obviously is going to need funding and all of that stuff. So I want to pray for him now so that the Lord can take care of all the preparation that needs done in his heart to prepare him and provide for all he needs. So if we can come up and pray for these two, I would appreciate the work that you do in prayer. You two can just stand here in the middle.